Janet walked into a small cafe in Los Angeles, California. She looked around the shop, trying to find the person she was supposed to meet. In a corner by the window, a young man waved at her. Janet walked over to the table and sat down across from him. The young man said he understood if Janet had kept him waiting since she'd gotten stuck in traffic. Janet lived in Bakersfield and only visited Los Angeles once in a while, so she wasn't familiar with the area. The young man told her it was fine and hoped it hadn't been too much trouble for her to drive all the way out. Janet said it wasn't any trouble at all. She felt like she needed to talk to someone about what had happened. Janet's boyfriend, Arthur, had been with her for about 2 years, and they were really happy together. They'd moved in together, and life was pretty simple since they both went to the same college. A few months ago, Arthur told Janet that he was going to spend the night at his old hostel and would be back the next morning. He wasn't going alone. His friend Fred and Fred's ex-girlfriend Maggie were going with him. Arthur explained that he, Fred, Maggie, and another friend named Joe used to stay at that hostel when they first started college. Back then, Fred and Maggie were dating, and Joe and Arthur were both single. 6 years ago, there was this terrible fire at the hostel. Fred, Maggie, and Arthur were lucky enough to get out, but Joe died in the fire. After that happened, the hostel was shut down for about a year. They did some basic repairs and reopened it, but it's been empty ever since. Everyone who tried staying there said it was haunted. People reported all kinds of weird, unexplained stuff happening before they left. Fred thought that maybe Joe's spirit was still hanging around the hostel. Arthur, Fred, and Maggie decided to visit the place one last time, hoping to get some closure. Everyone remembered Joe as this really kind but mischievous guy. Even though he was always pulling pranks, he genuinely cared about his friends. Fred wasn't the best student, so he relied on Joe a lot for help with his assignments. Joe also helped Janet out during her first semester when she was having money problems. Their friendship was really solid, but Fred wasn't sure if Maggie would want to come along, considering they'd broken up. But when Janet called Maggie, she said yes. She'd been heartbroken over Joe's death too, and they had so many memories together. That evening, Fred and Maggie showed up at Janet's apartment, and the three of them left together. The next morning, Janet woke up and realized that Arthur, Fred, and Maggie still weren't back. She tried calling all of them, but nobody picked up. Later that day, Janet got the devastating news. Three people had been found dead inside the old, supposedly haunted hostel near the university. It was Arthur, Fred, and Maggie. The police searched the hostel but didn't find anything suspicious. Their deaths seemed sudden and completely unexplained. Local people and students who'd stayed in the area all said something was seriously wrong with that place. People often heard strange noises, like fire crackling and smoke coming from the chimney, even though the hostel had been closed for years. The investigation pointed to possible supernatural causes, and eventually the police just gave up. But Janet refused to believe the place was actually haunted. She thought maybe some criminal or homeless person had been secretly living there and caused the tragedy. Janet was determined to find out what really happened, so she decided to spend the night at the hostel herself. She packed supplies, a sleeping bag, coffee to stay awake, a flashlight, and a knife for protection. When she got there, she saw that the police had put up tape around the property, but there wasn't any security, so it was easy for her to get inside. Janet explored every room on all 3 floors. The rooms were empty and in terrible shape from years of being abandoned. She went straight to the room where Arthur, Fred, and Maggie had been found. The room was dark, with just a faint glow from the streetlights outside. Janet set up her stuff in a corner and waited. For a while, the hostel was completely silent. Eventually, she got sleepy and dozed off, even though she'd been drinking coffee. About an hour later, she woke up with a start from a nightmare. In the dream, she was trapped in a dark room with this figure she couldn't recognize. It was a man who looked like he'd been burned black as coal, standing just inches away from her. Janet was terrified, but then she realized it was just a dream and felt relieved. It was 2 a.m., and the hostel was still quiet and dark. After thinking about what her dream might mean, Janet decided to get up and walk around. She looked out the window at the empty street and thought she heard a noise in the hallway. She rushed out to check, but the hallways were empty. Still, she felt like something unsettling was there with her. As she turned around to grab her flashlight, this cold breeze brushed against her neck. She spun around and saw that every single door was wide open. Janet was frozen with fear and slowly walked back to the room. Her phone was blinking, almost dead, which made her panic. She tried to send a text but couldn't get any signal. Janet was desperate, so she walked over to the window to try to get reception. She heard footsteps behind her and nervously turned around but didn't see anyone. The footsteps kept getting closer until she felt this cold presence right next to her. Janet was overwhelmed with fear. She grabbed her phone and headed for the door, but it suddenly slammed shut. Something grabbed her leg and dragged her across the room. She was screaming in terror, knowing that no one could hear her. Whatever had her ankle was squeezing tighter and tighter, and it was incredibly painful, but she managed to yell out, "Joe, let me go!" There was this violent jerk, and her ankle cracked. The pain was intense, but finally, whatever had her let go. Janet escaped through the window, sliding down a pipe. She had no idea what would have happened if she hadn't gotten out of there that night. She was lucky to escape with just a broken ankle, but Janet was convinced there was something evil in that hostel. Something that might have killed her boyfriend and his friends. Janet sighed and took a sip of water. Aaron, sitting across from her, crossed his arms and frowned. He understood that Janet had encountered something malevolent, but he promised her he'd look into the mystery further. Viewers were encouraged to subscribe to the channel, check out more videos, and press the bell icon for updates.